Hi everyone, welcome to CEO Confidential from Frank Pagano.
And welcome back also from Pierangelo Soldavini.
We're going to discuss today about a hot topic, money. And before we meet our speaker, let's run a few bits of information. Sebastian, welcome to the show. Question for you. Who are you? What do you do for a living?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a company called Klarna that I was part of starting 17 years ago now. It's quite crazy. It's been that long time, but I was fortunately only 23 back then. So it gives me a couple more decades to go at this.
Excellent. No, thank you very much. Welcome again. Let's start exactly from Klarna. How did you create it? How is it going so far? What would you say is your core offering today?
Well, today it's very different than when we started, but I would say like at the very beginning of it, we realized that, gotta remember this is 2004, people are starting to shop online, but still at very small volumes compared to today. And people were very worried, like, would I get the product? Would it look like the picture on the web? What if I want to make a return? Will I get my money back? And so there was like all these challenges. And we recognized that since most people in the countries we were active in, Sweden back then, had debit cards, it was quite risky to send money and then hopefully receive a product. And the idea was simply, what if you could, provide a small piece of credit so that the consumer could touch and feel the product before they paid for it and feel more comfortable. And it turned out that consumers really like that, and that was kind of the beginning of what today internationally is called buy now, pay later, but it was kind of the starting point of it. I mean, today Klarna, obviously with about 100 million users worldwide, we do 2 million transactions a day. We have 400,000 retailers. We have 7,000 employees. We're a fully licensed bank. We offer card products. Here is my Klarna card that I use on Apple Pay. So like, banking services, tons of different financial services. But the core idea was that, making shopping online just slightly more safer and simpler than the alternatives that existed back then.
Yes, Sebastian, you said that buy now, pay later. This is the formula that it exploded in this last couple of years. Which is the underlying philosophy of BNPL? Does this easy money change your life for best, or is only e-shopping and online commerce?
Right. I think that whether it's easy money or not, I think that's partially a media interpretation. I think that, again, when we look at this, the way I think about it is that, 50% of Klarna's volume today, which actually most people don't know, half of our volume is pay now. So people pay the full amount upfront for the purchase. The other half is some kind of delay. And in general, if you're in a physical store, it's probably 80% pay now and 20% some kind of delay. And I think that what I believe, right, is that people first and foremost should pay with money they have. But there are occasions where credit makes sense. So credit has a purpose. And one of them is when you shop online, because it's just safer for the consumer to touch and feel the product before they pay for it. So there are specific areas where credit has purpose. What's more important in those situations is to ask yourself, what kind of credit should the consumer use when they need credit or want to use credit? And I think, how do you evaluate what is good credit? And to me, like, the criteria is really the cost of it, whether you're paying off kind of in a meaningful time. So like if you're paying off a holiday you had 2 years ago, that's a pretty bad sign. But if you're paying off a computer while you're using it for 3 years, might make sense. And then like, what are the the banks or whoever is providing you the credit, how are they treating your data? How are they helping you to pay back and so forth? So these are the evaluation criteria. And I think what we've been trying to provide is a product that is better. So if you look at, for example, compared to credit cards, we don't charge interest. In many countries, we don't charge late fees. We don't encourage you to borrow against your full monthly spend, but only on specific items. We encourage to use installments over revolving because installments are more safe because it's clear you pay off in a specific period of time as opposed to revolving. So, you know, if you are of the political opinion that credit should not exist at all, then obviously I'm not going to win a debate with you. But if you do believe that credit, you know, occasionally can make sense, which I believe it does, then it's more a question which type of credit. And we've been trying to provide and create the best form of credit that we can imagine compared to credit cards and other forms that have existed historically. And we do believe that it is a healthier and more sustainable type of credit.
This type of credit made Klarna one of the fintech unicorns. And fintech is changing the way to do banking. Is it the way, from your point of view, to democratize finance and banking and the world of money? And moreover, which opportunities and risks from this new world?
No, but I think there is. Look, I think that the interesting thing, right? I mean, as an entrepreneur and as an entrepreneurial company, you cannot really necessarily imagine a more interesting industry to go after than one that has had very low competition, high barriers of entry, has in the last decades over and over again shown that this lack of competition has meant that most of the innovation has been going into finding dirty ways and dirty tricks into how to lure consumers or retailers into paying more fees without necessarily providing more value. So, I mean, I can't imagine for an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial company. And in addition to this, this is a service that each one of us uses every day. I mean, every person today on a monthly basis does 65 payments for $55 each. That's $80 trillion worth of money that's flowing through. And this industry has been very inefficient. It's charging society massive costs. So a part of my messaging even to our investors today is that, like, part of what we're trying to do here is actually shrink this industry, make it smaller, make it more efficient. And our investors hopefully will benefit from having a bigger piece of a smaller pie in the future. So I think there's a massive opportunity to transform financial services and banking and actually have a customer focus. But it's also a very complex and interesting challenge because it's regulated, because it has obviously potential downside. There's a lot of consumer protection necessary and so forth. So it's a very different challenge than maybe building, like, you know, a standard tech company or something. I don't know, but I haven't done that. I don't know, but still, like, it is a huge industry that has charged people too much money, hasn't been obsessed about customer value, and finally is facing a little bit of competition. I think that in all its essence is good. With that said, I'm not an anarchist. I don't believe that, just the best will win and things will take care. I think, sometimes regulation makes sense. All human interactions benefit from having some basic rules of interactions, and finance industry also, that applies to us as well. So there are regulation that is good. But in general, the big issue with this industry has been lack of competition.
Sebastian, one question on new generations. Probably for them, you're going to be the only bank they will ever know. And what is the value of money for these new generations? And then you spoke about regulation. Is there also an opportunity for education of new kids who do banking for the first time in their life?
There is. I think, what's the value is going to be for money? It's hard to say, obviously. But I do think that, like, I think about it more. I usually I try to articulate it in a simplistic fashion, so because I think that's helpful, right? So a few years ago, when we sat down internally and discussed, like, okay, where is this all going? What's the opportunity for Klarna in kind of financial services? We sat down and said, look, a few years from now, and I don't know when this will happen, but I feel fairly certain that it will happen. It's a little bit like self-driving cars. Like, I don't know when, but I feel like eventually we'll probably get there, right? And the same goes for financial services. So one day, I believe people will wake up, somebody will wake up in the morning, and their computer will, contact them and say, hey, I analyzed your finances this night, and I realized that by switching your, mortgage provider, I could save you €5 a month. And the only thing you need to do is say yes. And then you say yes, and suddenly you have a lower cost mortgage. So it's if you believe that that's eventually going to happen, which I sincerely do, it will, it changes the whole purpose and positioning of banking, because so far banking has been about return on equity, return on assets. And if you listen to banks, what they actually say is that they are trying to maximize the interest gap, meaning that they pay as little as possible for deposits and savings, and they charge as much as possible for lending out money out, right? Which is kind of odd, because that's in conflict with the interest of their customers, of what they want. And I think once we get to a place where technology and will work on the benefit on behalf of the customers, helping them avoid to pay more than they have to, and giving them the best returns possible for the savings, it changes very much the fundamentals of the industry, and this will happen. It is already happening. And so when we thought about it that way, we realized, okay, who do we want to be and all of that? Like, what should our role be? And our conclusion was, well, there's not going to be a lot of profit here left, because all the over profits that have existed from being able to charge people more than what they should really pay, and all the things that have lacked of transparency, massive switching cost, all the issues that have been existing in the banking services will basically go away. Now, again, I'm not saying this will happen overnight, but in the longer perspective, I believe that's the direction of things. And then we realized, well, the best position for us to be in must be to be that advisor, to be the one that actually tells you, like, you should switch. Because maybe if we do that, you'll say, hey, you just saved me €5, so I can share €1 with you. Thank you for supporting us, right? So I think that the core essence of future financial services is to actually create that value. And in a way, what's nice about it, that was the original intent of the bank man, right? Or the bank woman. It was mostly a man back in those days, 150 years ago. It was supposed to be this person that you went to that really genuinely cared for you and your finances, and genuinely tried to help you, spend less, or save more money and get better returns on your investments, and have the lowest cost. But like somewhere along the line, that like kind of went away. But that's the genuine, it's a personal kind of finance assistant that really works on your behalf. And if you would have that, hopefully actually customers, as much as I sincerely believe in the importance of education of the youth around finances and so forth, in the best of worlds, they don't have to think about it, because they have an amazing advisor in their phone all the time who makes sure that supports them to take the right decisions, and they don't have to do all these things, right? And they don't need anyone to educate them on interest rate, because nobody is doing the dirty practices of trying them to borrow money in a way that they don't really understand the consequences and the cost of. Like, in the best of worlds. Now, will we entirely achieve that? Is, we'll see, but hopefully, right? I would love for people to think less about finances and more about hanging out with their friends and doing other things. Like, that would be awesome. But there's a little bit of work left before we're there.
Clear. Sebastian, I'm going to switch gears. Now, a question about you, if I can. What would you say is your own disruption in a nutshell?
In what sense?
Like, what you brought to the world, for example, banking, or what is really yours?
Of what we've accomplished with Klarna.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of disruption of your industry, what is yours? What you brought to the world with Klarna?
Well, first and foremost, like, I don't necessarily feel that we're done, right? So I think there's so much left to be done, but I do believe that what you have in me is somebody who, has been on the other side. I was brought up in an immigrant family. We didn't always have money. I saw the consequences of parents borrowing too much. And then the struggles that came with that as they tried to, fix their own economy. And so in a way, I kind of feel like you have a little bit of like an insider in myself, somebody who is as much loves this industry, also hates this industry, and wants to challenge it and push it, and so forth. And I think hopefully, like, it's a little bit like I feel like I'm an insider sometimes, like I'm coming in here and like everyone believes that I'm just part of the banking industry nowadays due to the success, but I'm actually here to change it, to challenge it, to reduce it, and there I'm pretty ruthless.
Sebastian, let's come out of the financial services sector at a more general level. We experienced in these last years general lack of leadership. In your opinion, which are the features of the leader of the future?
I mean, it's a very difficult question. I used to say, and I think it's true, that for myself, if I look at my last 17 years here, I've spent half of my passion and interest and energy around trying to figure out what does great financial services look like, how do we develop our products? And the other half, I really been trying to learn and understand, how do you make things happen? Like, how do you make things move? How do you, get things done? And I think it was very different, as we were a small organization with maybe up to 100 people. It was much more natural to me. We were just driving, a lot of things just work out of the box when you're a small company. And you can really be very dedicated to your cause and what you're trying to accomplish. As we grew into a large organization, I struggled hard for many years. I was very frustrated. I felt that the productivity went down. I felt that politics came in. I felt it was difficult. And I really was very frustrated many times, as I couldn't really, identify what was really the things that made things work, that we could make things happen as a large organization. In the last few years, I feel that we have had much more progress with that. We've been trying to create a culture and a company where a lot of small units, quite organic, quite different. We've been trying to find a culture where we are really open when we attract people about the fact that this is not like your everyday company, but we want to attract people that really want to make a difference. And with that comes the fact that it's going to be tough, it's going to be hard. We often say that nowadays, like already at the interviews, just so you know, this is not going to be your average place. Like, this is going to be challenging. You're going to be tired, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to feel like, how am I going to solve this? You're going to get tons of responsibilities and things and so forth. So I think that, like, giving people an honest understanding of what they're getting into, and then when it comes to the leadership, I mean, I think the really tricky balance is kind of this. I really look a lot to the Toyota way and kind of the traditional martial arts and all these things. It's like, how do you, because there's something beautiful to that craftsmanship. I mean, some of you may have seen this on YouTube. You'll find this video about this sushi chef that trains his son, and after 20 years, he's actually allowed to slice sushi. So there's something about the beauty of really great craftsmanships when you challenge people inside the company to develop their own skills, to become really proficient in whatever they do. And often that is about, instructions and telling them and guiding them and showing them. But then you got to balance that versus like allowing people to explore for themselves and make their own mistakes and so forth, so you don't become too instructive. And that's, I think, hopefully, I'll give a concrete example. When COVID came along, there was a lot of asked questions. So should we stay at home? Should we, work from home, or should we go to work and so forth? And I think that was an interesting situation, because obviously a lot of managers internally were coming to us and saying, what should we do? Just tell us what to do. And we were like, yeah, but we have offices in 40 locations across the world. There's different situations, different countries and so forth. And we ended up saying that, like, people needed to decide for themselves. And it was, some people were disappointed. They wanted clear leadership. They wanted clarity. What exactly am I supposed to do? But we also saw how that lifted and developed people and gave them, forced them to think for themselves and take their own responsibility. And I think that's the balance in leadership to a lot, is like, when are you being more instructive and saying, like, this is it? Because in some emergency situations, you need to show very clear leadership. And at the same point of time, if you do that too often, or you're too instructive and too tough, then in other situations, it's more about like letting people decide for themselves and develop as individuals, right? I think but I don't think that's necessarily new. I think that problem has probably existed for a couple of millennia.
Sebastian, a question for you that we call the Russian roulette. Number 1, technology. Number 2, sustainability. Number 3, marketing. Number 4, mindset. What do we need to change the world? You only have one bullet.
Okay, I gotta remember which one you said. You said marketing?
Marketing, technology, sustainability, mindset.
I would say mindset then. Well, I mean, I think at the core it's that, right? It's the way we think about things it starts there, and then the rest will follow.
Sebastian, another question for you. You explained us that Klarna's challenge is to change the banking industry, and you explained very well why it's so hard to change the sector. But at a more general level, which is the first obstacle to change for people?
Wow. What's the first obstacle to change? I don't know. I think at least that I think most times when I work with people, one of the maybe most critical elements that allows people to develop is when something goes wrong or isn't the way it could be, what do you focus on? The problems or the things that you yourself could have done differently, or the things that other people around you could have done differently. And I was brought up with in a family where there unfortunately was a lot of like guilt. Guilt was being used as a motivator for a lot of things, and I think to some degree, I don't know entirely why, but when I have gone to my psychiatry sessions, I've realized that I tend to always take responsibility on everything on myself. So I'm not really that focused on initially I'm not that focused on who would have done things, who else did wrongs, but I'm focused very much on it was my fault. What did I do wrong? And that's not always a good thing. That's actually sometimes a bad thing as well. But the benefit it has is that I don't focus that much on it. I really think always what's the thing that I could have done differently? And I think what it's benefited me in is that I learn very quickly because I'm very, very focused on that. And I think maybe the most important thing for change is that people should spend less energy thinking about what other people could have done differently and focus mostly on what could you have done yourself differently. This is very similar to marriage counsel that you get after a couple of decades of marriage. Just like stop thinking about what the other individual could have done and start thinking about what you could have done, right? Because I think that most good relationships flourish more if you have that starting point. So I think that's really it. And then if you do focus more on that, then change will come, right? You will analyze, you will see. Doesn't mean that everything always is your own fault, right? There are obviously situations where people around you could have done things differently, but it's not that relevant. I mean, the relevant thing is what you learn and what you take with you, and then change will come, in my opinion, as a consequence of that.
Yes, following on this path, can you give us 3 tips you would give to a young who is designing his future?
I do think that, some of us, I tend to believe that some of us, for whatever reason, have a very strong passion in life already from the beginning, and they're very keen on something. If you have that, I really would follow that much. I was always more like a generalist. I can suddenly find myself sitting and reading Wikipedia articles about battles of the 13th century Italy or something like that, or whatever. And so so I'm always been very curious. And so to me, it's just I love getting passionate about something. I don't really care that much what it is. So I think that but follow your heart and if there was something that I really felt that I changed about 5-6 years ago is that I was listening maybe a little bit too much to people at that point in time. And around 2015, I said to myself, look, if I'm going to continue doing this, because that point in time I've been doing it for 10 years, I said to myself, I'm going to continue this. I don't want to have regrets, right? There's a great Edith Piaf song about, no regrets, right? And I'm not going to try to pronounce French because then I'm going to make a fool out of myself. But I really thought about that, right? I want to look back at life and feel that I really tested my own limits, that I realized what I could do, that I really, pushed it, and I made the most that I could do. And every day I look at, I want to look back and say I've done my very best this day, and see how far I can take it. And I think if I really encourage people to try that. I feel sometimes that people tend to fall into either a negative or a positive spiral A negative spiral is one where they tend to kind of be more obsessed about what other people could have done differently, again, coming back to that previous topic, and then kind of blame others, and then they kind of, they end up not fulfilling their own lives entirely. And other people tend to somehow find themselves in a more positive spiral where they're like, you know what, look, I could actually do this, and then that allows me to do this. And they're more like, they're more concerned with how they learn and educate themselves and develop. And I don't know the secret recipe, but I would love for more people to find themselves in the positive spiral in their lives.
So thank you for this positive spiral from a game changer like Sebastian Siemiatkowski. I hope I pronounced it well.
Yes.
Thank you from me and from Pagano. Thank you all those who have been with us today, and see you next time on CEO Confidential. Thank you.